بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسول كريم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah, ask Him send peace and blessing our Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the last session, we finished with this slide on the shurut or the prerequisites for the musalli, for the worshipper, for the person, him or herself. So in terms of shurut, which is the plural of shart, each person that prays salat, for the salat to be valid in the person, these conditions have to be found: that they're Muslim, they have Islam, they're sound of mind, and they're baligh, or they've reached bulugh, meaning puberty, and not to be in a state of hayd or nifas, which applies to women. Hayd being the monthly cycle or menses, and nifas means afterbirth discharge. So in each worshipper, these conditions need to be found. Shurut are important. Shurut makes this act valid from the word get-go. If you don't fulfill the shurut, if you don't fulfill the conditions, then this act is actually not acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's the one that set the shurut. How you come to Allah, because the whole point of deen is to, our goal is Allah. Our purpose is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and nearness to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He has prescribed certain conditions in the acts of worship that make it valid that we can approach Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, these conditions have to be fulfilled. If these conditions are not fulfilled, it doesn't matter how long the salat is and how much concentration you have in it, it will not be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The shurut of salat itself, so those were the shurut of, we did covered in the last session, the shurut of the musalli, the worship, and now is the shurut of the act of salat itself. In terms of shurut of salat, there are several: tahara, purification or cleanliness or Islamic hygiene; time, that means that the correct time enters; qibla, face the right direction; covering the awra, meaning covering the part of the body that needs to be covered for the nakedness, or the has to be covered, the minimum amount that needs to be covered that makes the salat valid; and niyyah, intention, because this is an act of ibadah, and as the hadith says, innamal a'malu binniyat, that actions are according to their intentions, right? So without intention, it cannot be an act of worship, right? So the first condition was tahara, purification or cleanliness. Tahara, there are two types of tahara: tahara from purification from a hadath, a state, and purification from a najasa, a physical impurity. So the way you know one of the differentiation between these two is, one requires intention. The tahara from a state requires intention, while the tahara from a najasa, from a physical impurity, does not require. So for example, let's say there is some physical impurity on land, and a torrential rain comes and washes away, completely cleans it. That requires no intention. Or someone who's not of sound mind, which is a condition for ibadah, and they wash something 7 times, then that washing is valid, even though the person is not able to make a proper intention, cannot properly worship. And a state of hadith, to purify yourself from a state of hadith, requires a state of impurity, requires a person to make an intention. So for example, make intention for wudu, to pray salat, or make intention from the state of a hadith where it requires ghusl, from janaba, for example, a person after intercourse needs to do ghusl. So that it has to be done with intention. Without intention, neither wudu will happen nor a ghusl will occur. In terms of tahara from a state, so the first type, there are a few parts of it or aspects of it that we need to know. Mutatahhir, so the person who is actually purifying himself or herself. So mutatahhir it has to be a Muslim, has to be an aqil, somebody of sound mind. Mumayyiz is a child who has not reached the age of puberty, but is discerning in terms of, knows what's right and wrong, what's clean, what's pure, what's impure. So they're just before the age of puberty. So they're still a child. They're not baligh. They have not reached the age of puberty, mature. The signs of puberty are not there, but are able to discern between right and wrong. Has niyyah, has made intention. So this is in relation to the mutatahhir, the person purifying. As for the mutahhar bihi, the thing that you clean with, right? The thing that you purify with. So there's two things, of course. There's water, normal water that we use, clean water, generally what comes out of our taps. This water in its not normal state, and dirt. Dirt is, of course, in tayammum, where you cannot do wudu. because of lack of water or sickness, then you use dust or dirt, and that will come later on, the details. These are the only two means by which you can purify. Types of tahara: sughra and kubra, minor and major. So what's a sughra? What's the minor? It's to do the act of wudu. It's actually, these are the acts that we need to be done. Kubra is you need to do ghusl. And the corresponding muttahar minhu, the state that you need to make the purification from, the last category, asghar. Asghar means the state that you need to make wudu in, therefore you do the sughra, which is wudu. And akbar is the ghusl, is a state that hadith akbar is a state that you need ghusl. For example, janaba is a hadith akbar, and therefore you need to make the kubra on the left in the types of tahara, the major cleanliness. Right, so those are the aspects related to the state of tahara. As for the types of water, why we need to know this? Historically, most of us don't today think about water as a issue in terms of cleanliness. We just take the water out of the tap. But we need to know the categories of water that are used, because sometimes it can occur that we need to make water out of a container or a limited amount of water. So we need to still know these ahkam, and they're still applicable today, even though we might be doing them without even realizing it. There are three types of water. Tahur is the first one. This is the type of water that is pure in itself and can purify. So it can remove the hadith, the state. You can do wudu and ghusl with it, and you can also wash najasa. So it's like original water. It's actual water. It's what descends from the sky in the form of rain, snow, and hail. It's what comes out of the well. It's ocean water, lake water, etc. And nothing has changed it. There's no smell, taste, or color in it from something pure or impure. But it's an actual original water. The tahir is the second category of water, which is pure, but it cannot purify. So it's pure in itself. It's not dirty, but you cannot clean with it. And this is something that water that's been changed with something pure. So for example, you get a glass of water and you put a tea bag in it, and the color of the tea comes into that water. So either the taste, smell, or color of that water has changed to the point that now you cannot really call it water anymore, even though it's pretty much all water. But if a smell, color, or taste changes, then it's not the original water, which was tahur. Therefore, this water cannot be used neither can it be used for wudu or ghusl, neither can be used to remove najasa. This differs from, there is another view in other schools that you can use this water, and you can use other things actually to remove najasa. For example, if you take Dettol or you take juice, for example, and you use that to wash off najasa, physical impurity, right? The najasa, as long as it's removed, that'll be clean according to that. But in the fiqh al-Hanbali, and we are going according to the madhab of the Imam Ahmad al-Hanbali rahimahullah, that if something pure falls in, like let's say milk falls into, changes the color, you cannot use this water for istinja, you cannot use it for wudu, you cannot use it for ghusl, you cannot use it for cleaning najasa from clothes and so forth. This water is no longer usable. You can drink it, you can use it for other things, for cooking and so forth, but you cannot use this for any ritual cleanliness from a state or from a physical najasa. And if the water also has been used previously in another lifting of another hadith. So for example, someone made wudu with water. Now there's no najasa on the limbs of wudu, face, arms, feet, and so forth. And the water collects into a container. Let's say someone used a lot of water to make wudu, and it collects into a tub. That water is used water. It's called ma'ul musta'mal. It's a used water, and used water cannot be reused again for another. So this water is tahir, it's clean. You can use it. You might think, why would you want to use that water? Well, let's say you live in a place that's very arid, water is very limited, and you don't want to waste that water. You can use it for maybe for cleaning clothes. Sorry, not for cleaning clothes, for cooking or something like that. So therefore, this is valuable to some people, right? Because it's limited water. But the water itself is tahir, it's clean, it's not dirty, there's no najasa in the water. But it's not tahur, and it cannot be used. So it's used water, it cannot be used for cleanliness purposes, either for removing hadith, a state, like wudu ghusl, or for removing physical filth or najasa. The last one is najis water. That is a water that's been changed with najasa, right? Any amount of water that is changed through filth. Let's say urine came into water, let's say it came into a lake. we're using an example that might be realistic, might not be, and the smell of urine or filth has come into that water. Even if it's a lake or a dam, that water is now filthy, cannot be used. Right? So the water has changed. The water has changed in najasa. That water in itself is najis now. It's actually filthy itself. Secondly, the water is touched by najasa, and it's less than 230 liters. So 200. The hadith mentioned that if water it reaches qullatain, two qullas, two large earthenwares. Now it's about roughly. Here I mentioned Shaykh Amir Bahjat. They mentioned that the measurement that he has quoted, which is 230 liters. Shafi'i ulama today, as far as I know, they quote 216 liters, others 160, 190, like that. But basically, a medium-sized bathtub or normal-sized bathtub amount of water, if najasa falls into it, and it's less than, according to this, 230 liters, even though the water has not changed, so this second category of water, it's less than 230 liters, and a drop of urine, for example, as an example, even the water doesn't change. This water is now najis. It's not usable for tahara. It's not even tahir. You can't even use it in cooking or anything like that. Maybe you can pour it into the garden, but this water cannot be used to make wudu with. It cannot be used to remove najasa, to wash yourself from najasa, because itself has become najis. So that threshold, the qullatain, or that measurement, that 230 liters, is the amount that if it's below that, a najasa comes into it, even if the water doesn't change, you cannot use it for tahara purposes, right? In terms of, I mentioned that this is according to the Hanbali madhab. It's very important for students. Now, I did a series translation, Shaykh Amir Bahjat's other course, which is called Journey of Fiqh, which is a series on the science around fiqh, the development and the history of it, an appreciation for the work of each madhab, and having tamadhub, which is sticking to a madhab. Remember always that if you want to study fiqh, a beginner student will always have to adopt teachers and ulama, and will have to follow in their footsteps. So there is nothing wrong in Islam that if a person picks up like a Hanbali Fiqh book, like Zadul Mustaqni, and takes everything and practices it, there's no, actually he's absolved from any responsibility. The alim that wrote it, the great imam of the past who wrote that, he's responsible and he is accountable. But this person himself is absolved and he's free, and he can follow that fiqh book, whether it be in the Hanbali mazhab or another madhab. So therefore, as this course, and this is the way to study. The way to study is gradual. It's step by step. Even in language studies, Shaykh Amir Bahjat gave the example of if a person wants to learn Arabic, and then if initial study starts dealing with difference of opinion, and a student at the beginning of the study should never be delving into difference of opinion, because it will confuse them, because they're actually not capable of dealing with it, and actually they won't move forward in their ilm because they get caught up in the differences too early. So in the initial study, it's like learning a language. So in Arabic grammar, if you study, we later found out that there is different madhabs, schools of thought within Arabic language. So you got the Basriyun, the Imams of Basra, and the Kufiyun, the Imams of Kufa, cities in Iraq today, in the past. And this difference, if you get bogged down, let's say you cannot teach a grade 1 student about the Basriyun, Kufiyun of grammar. Similarly with English, Shaykh Amir gave the example of English. If you want to study English, spelling, for example. So there's the British way of spelling and language. There's a difference of opinion. And then there's the American way of spelling. Now, if you start teaching your word, well, this madrasa or this madhab school, the British madhab or madrasa says this, and the American one says this, and ikhtilaf, he starts dealing with all these different, as the first, his introduction to the language. So he's going to confuse himself. He's actually not going to progress. He's going to get stuck in these trivial issues and miss the main mark, which is the acquisition of the language, which is the purpose of studying grammar or language. So similarly also in fiqh, person has to learn gradually. I asked one of the senior ulama of Kuwait, and he said for the average person, their madrasa, their madhab is their local imam. They go to imam of their masjid, they ask him questions, he answers them for them. It should be an alim, right? There are non-ulama imams out there as well. Second level is that he becomes a talib al-ilm, a serious seeker of knowledge. When he becomes a serious seeker of knowledge, then he should stay within the madrasa, the school, of a madhab, a school of thought, one of the four madhahib. And then when he develops in his knowledge, the third level is when he reaches like the pinnacles of knowledge. And this is a lifelong effort. It's not something that's open to the average alim, even the new alim or graduate. And it's not open differently to the public, because it requires a lot of research and time. And a view he forms of another school is more stronger in his view based on all the research and everything, and he's fit for that level of he has reached a level in his knowledge where such a decision can be made, right? Which is very high level of scholarship. It's not open to everybody. It is open to everybody, but how many will reach that level and actually do justice to it? They're not following their desires. They're not following their own personal opinion. They've done tahqiq and research to arrive at that. So these are levels. There is levels in knowledge. For the beginning student, we're going to be explaining in this course, as Shaykh Amir explained himself, the Hanbali madhab as per the final word of the madhab. Right. The next part is regarding vessels or containers. Right. So the reason why this is a chapter in fiqh books is because always water is stored somewhere. Now, generally today we get a lot of our water out of taps, but still until now, when we go to the bathroom, in most cases we use some sort of container. So it does exist till today. We do historically they had different types of containers made out of metal, made out of wood, made out of earthenware. Containers existed of gold and silver. We'll go into that in a moment. And also they leather containers were also used. So what is permissible? Everything except gold and silver can be from a Muslim or kafir, are all permissible. All containers of any shape, sort, they are mubah, permissible. They're made from gold, except other than gold and silver, and it can be from a Muslim or kafir. There's no restriction for using a container from a non-Muslim. Then there are containers that are haram or forbidden. So, for example, and some of these are najis. For example, leather from carrion. Carrion is an animal that has died without halal slaughter. So, some of these are always haram. So, for example, najis animal, like leather, they made a container is made to store water from a haram animal, a najis animal, a filthy animal. Cat, for example, this will always be haram. You cannot use it for water or to store anything in it. Then non-tanned. Non-tanned animal means that specifically in the Hanbali mazhab, and this view is people wonder why there's ikhtilaf in the schools. Actually, as an example, it's mentioned in that course, the Journey of Fiqh, that Imams might view like the source of the hadith. They might disagree on the sihhat of hadith, the authenticity of hadith. So Imam Ahmad, the other three madhabs have taken that if leather from a halal animal, for example, a cow, is even if the animal is from killed in its carrion, but then the leather is tanned, it's purified. There is a riwayah, but Imam Ahmad considered the riwayah not to be sahih enough or authentic enough. Therefore, he has not taken that hadith. While the other three imams, so they differed in the way they categorized, the way they authenticated the hadith. The methodology was different, and they came to a different conclusion. So it's one of the peculiarities, one of the views of specific to the Hanbali mazhab, that leather from an animal that's not even slaughtered in the halal way is not pure and cannot be used. Definitely cannot be used for liquids. It's still in many parts of the world, leather containers or bags are used for water. So but the same leather is permissible for dry things. You can store dry things, but not liquid things. Also, what is haram? That which contains gold. Any container, small or large, whether it's used as decoration, whether the container is made out of gold, whether it's used as decoration, whether it's plated with gold, any type of gold that is used in any type of container, spoon, and so forth, is haram. That which contains silver is also haram, except a small amount that may be used for necessity. So, for example, if it's used to repair, because silver is very malleable, it's very soft, and it can be used to repair a hole in another metal container, wooden container. So it's very easy to work with. Therefore, it can be used a small amount, not for decoration. Can be used. It's haram to have spoons, bowls made out of gold and silver. It's haram to have decorations of gold and silver. You cannot do repairs with gold, but you can do small repairs with silver. So these are the ahkam rulings related two containers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding and tawfiq to practice what we're saying here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. By all means, please do, if you're benefiting from this, please do subscribe. And also at the bottom, do ask questions. If I know the answer, I'll answer the question. If I don't know, I'll ask one of my teachers, inshallah, and try to respond to you. Jazakumullah khaira. Assalamu alaikum.